Welcome to Bharata First. You're watching Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. And since you're here, I would like to thank you for your continued support. For those of you who haven't already subscribed, please like the video, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and then all notifications. Do follow our social media handles for all the latest updates, and you can also subscribe to our newsletter to get some incisive content. The Bharata First team runs a daily Big Picture quiz. Please do participate by going through the description in Big Picture videos. Here are the UPI IDs for those of you who would like to come forward and contribute. A small contribution that you make will be a giant leap for us to keep bringing you this content. So do continue to show your love and support. I need it now more so than ever. All this information along with some must-see recommendations are in the description of this video. So please go through it. Well, the Ministry of External Affairs last week clarified that India's position to abstain at the UN Human Rights Council during the resolution to probe Gaza violence is not new and that the country has abstained on previous occasions also. This was in response to a complaint raised by the Foreign Minister of the Palestinian National Authority that New Delhi's abstention at the UNHRC stifles the important work of advancing human rights for all peoples, including those of the Palestinian people. Responding to a question on the Palestinian Foreign Minister writing to his Indian counterpart S Jaishankar on the issue, the MEA spokesperson said a similar letter has been written to all countries who abstained. In this edition of Big Picture, we will analyze India-Palestine ties with regards to the abstention of the vote at the UNHRC. Joining me on the program today are Ashok Sajjanhar, former ambassador, Major General Shashi Asthana, retired defense and strategic expert, and Dr. Amlendu Mishra, Department of Politics, Lancaster University, UK. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of Big Picture. Ambassador, let me start the program with you first. Let's first try and understand and analyze this whole situation between India and Palestine. Palestine seems to be upset or miffed with India for the time being because we did not side with Palestine during a vote at the UN. Your thoughts on this entire issue?
Yeah, this issue has been raised with the Ministry of External Affairs also. At one of the weekly briefings, the official spokesperson said that it is not the first time that India has abstained. I think there have been earlier occasions also, 2015, 2016, at the UN Human Rights Council, we have abstained on similar votes. So, for anyone to suggest that it is a change in India's position, I don't think that would be accurate. It's not the first time that India has abstained. And of course, before that, we have voted very consistently on issues in favor of Palestine. We have always stood strongly behind, and supported the just Palestinian cause for its own state. We have been steadfast as far as the two-state solution is concerned. So I think our relations are good. India was one of the first non-Arab countries to recognize Palestine as a state. We have, Palestine's representation as an observer in the United Nations, in other UN agencies, providing support to it, giving land to it, establishing its own embassy here in New Delhi. I think across the board we have done that. We have been very supportive. So I think just for this one action, to suggest that India has changed its position, I don't think that would be accurate. Just about 10 days ago, this vote took place on the 27th of May in Geneva. Just 10 days before that, our permanent representative at the United Nations in New York had strongly spoken, for our support to the Palestinian cause and to the two-state solution as far as Palestine and Israel are concerned. And that continues to be our position. But of course, we have seen that Israel is also a significant partner in every sense, whether it is security, whether it is economic development, whether it is water purification, agriculture, a whole host of issues. So we have dehyphenated our relations. And, when We had our Prime Minister visiting Israel in 2017, 25 years after establishment of diplomatic relations. We also had the Prime Minister visiting on a separate visit, visiting Ramallah, that is the capital on the West Bank. And I think it's a recognition of India's support for the Palestinian cause that we had President Mahmoud Abbas give the highest honor of Palestine on Prime Minister Modi. Frank.
Absolutely, absolutely. General, let me bring you in now. And since Ambassador brought up the West Bank and Ramallah, let's talk about this issue at large. Do you believe the problem now is that Hamas has gained a lot more traction of late, and there is an internal tussle between West Bank and Gaza, and that's why this is being played out this way? That Ramallah wants India to support the Palestinian cause because it's looking for further legitimacy as well.
See, as far as the Palestinian cause is concerned, you see there are three segments which we must distinguish between for the viewers. One is the West Bank, where you have Fatah and Mahmoud Abbas. He is the one who rules it. As far as Gaza is concerned, Hamas is ruling it. Hamas has a political wing and has a militant wing. Now, as far as India is concerned, all these people are Palestinians. So India supports Palestine, certainly, supports just cause of Palestine, that is also sure. We also, there is no doubt that as far as Jews are concerned, they are also human beings. They need a separate state, which is Israel, and they also need to protect themselves. At the same time, Palestinians are also human beings. They also need a separate state and separate country, and they also need to protect themselves. As far as Hamas activities are concerned, now at times Hamas activities are not the kind of activities which we would like to support. But notwithstanding that, as far as Palestinian cause is concerned, that we certainly support. Now the problem is, I have been to that area very intimately, and I have seen all these places. There are two major issues when we talk of two-nation theory. It's very easy to say, everybody says it should be two nations. But how do you divide those two nations? Now, when you see the West Bank, there are 167 enclaves of Palestinians which are embedded in 205 Israeli colonies. Now, how do you divide a situation like this? Similarly, when it comes to Jerusalem, now in Jerusalem, the eastern portion of Jerusalem, you have, it is important, it's a competing claims. It is important for Christians because of the crucifixion. It is important for Jews. It is important for Muslims because Al-Aqsa Mosque is there. Now, Al-Aqsa Mosque is third holiest shrine which is supposed to be of the Islamists. So, considering the situation, it is actually inseparable. And as far as Indian position is concerned, as Ambassador explained, it's a very tightrope walk because we have very good relations with Israel and we have also very good relations with Palestinians. We were the first ones who recognized Palestinians outside the upper Arab world. So, and when we visited actually, we were welcomed in all colonies, although Israelis cannot enter the Arab colony and vice versa. And the present situation, problem which came up is because of this separation. They wanted to do a little bit of separation and certain families shifted, but then the Israelis families which shifted, they also again lodged a complaint against the Supreme Court. No, that land belongs to me. And they were fearing that perhaps this decision will come in their favor. And a whole lot of other things happened, which I think everybody has read in the news. So I don't have to repeat that. But the fact is, it is easy to say that there should be two solutions, but how do you divide those two nations is the biggest problem. And for that, there are no easy answers because the standpoints are very hard. For decades, they have lived like that and the claims are very hard. And I don't think they will budge from their claims. Now, as far as Hamas is concerned, their fighting rockets will not help. And when it comes to negotiation, the Hamas as well as the Fatah, they both join, and under Abbas, they are the ones who negotiate. So when it comes to negotiations with Egypt, which played a major part in bringing the truce, the negotiation is done by Abbas, and then at that point of time for the negotiations they join, both of them join. That is the position as of now. Frank.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dr. Mishra, let me bring you in now. Like the general has just pointed out, this is clearly a very complex issue. And as far as the Palestinian cause itself is concerned, there are several actors within Palestine who have their own causes, so to speak, and to put that forward. So does that become a lot more complex then? Because there are so many multiple dimensions really as far as the Palestinian cause itself is concerned.
For our viewers, let's remember this very clearly. Palestine is a house divided. The Palestinians are themselves not united. As it has been highlighted by both our speakers, it's divided between physical division that is existing there between West Bank and Gaza Strip, and there is a political and intellectual and ideological division. So Hamas and Fatah can't see eye to eye with each other. So if they are not united, so why should the world outside vote for them as a united cause? That is the argument which can be put forward in this specific context. Now, we have been talking about why India should have a moral position, why India should support Palestinian cause come what may. I think that needs a rethink. Number one, Palestinians are not united in their own voice. Second, the Palestinians are also losing their support among the fellow Arab countries and the Islamic countries, in spite of whatever was going on with those rocket fires and Israeli bombings and so on and so forth. United Arab Emirates, which established the diplomatic linkages with Israel, along with the Abraham Accords, was very clear. And it says that we are not going to renege on whatever developments or whatever progress we have made in our bilateral relationship. So what we need to see here is that when we talk about dehyphenating the relationship between the Palestinians and Israelis, we have to see how these actors are behaving in terms of the larger peace process, in terms of practical actualities of a two-state solution. Hamas, let's be very clear, is not interested in a two-state solution, whereas Fatah is interested in a two-state solution. So how do you bring them together? Why should India sacrifice its own interests because of these divided groups that exist in Palestine? So unless and until they come together, they form a kind of coherent, united whole, and then go back to the negotiating table. There is no point India sacrificing its interest, and that is one of the very reasons why many of the Western countries, I mean, I was looking at the voting pattern, there were 24 in support of, against Israel, 9 against Israel, 24 in support, and 14 abstention, of which India was a part. And let's look at the ones who have supported Israel. Germany, for instance. Germany is a supporter of the Palestinian cause, but it realizes it very well that the Palestinian cause cannot be taken forward unless and until they address all the nitty-gritties that they have on the ground. So the intelligent thing for us to do here is to make this very clear to the Palestinians themselves as to how they need to behave. And so long as the Hamas is there with its obtrusive position that there cannot be a two-state solution and that there cannot be a state such as Israel, I think there is very little room to maneuver so far as moving forward is concerned.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ambassador, let me come to you now. Let's talk about Hamas in particular. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we engage with the Hamas officially, do we? Because what is our stand really as far as Hamas is concerned? And considering how the equations have changed in Palestine, is it time for us to start engaging with all stakeholders? Because Fatah and the others seem to be getting a little weaker as time progresses.
Yeah, you're right. It's my understanding also. We do not recognize Hamas as the representative of Palestinians. As far as we are concerned, it is President Mahmoud Abbas. You would remember that he had come to India soon after the Israeli Prime Minister's visit in 2018, I think early 2018. Just after that, Prime Minister Modi visited Ramallah in 2018 February, and after that, Mahmoud Abbas had also come here. So, for us, It is the West Bank, it is Ramallah, it is Al Fatah, it is Mahmoud Abbas, who represents Palestine. I don't think we, nor do we, I'm not very certain whether we characterize, we have designated Hamas as a terrorist organization, although the US has, sorry, designated Hamas as a terrorist. EU has designated Hamas as a terrorist organization. And I think we also need to recognize that Hamas receives all its support from Iran. And that is how they are ready. That is how they get all their weapons and equipments and all the rockets. And in the present case, I think also we need to recognize, Frank, that the initial provocation was really from the side of Hamas, because and they seem to have been ready for it. And this has been captured very clearly in the statements by India at the UN Security Council. India is a non-permanent member now, and it has been playing a very important role in many of the issues that have come up, whether it is the Myanmar issue or some of the others. India has been playing a very important role, and there also in our statement, we made it very clear that it was the provocation from the Hamas. Because if it was not really raring for a fight with Israel, and the reason for that is also very clear. It was very, very domestic, because they were to have the Palestinian elections there. They got postponed, but then Hamas wants to project itself as the real representative of Palestine and the Palestinians, which is ready to fight to achieve and to promote the cause of a Palestinian state. And by this, it would like to suggest that President Mahmoud Abbas and Al Fatah, and they are not really cut out for this job. That is why you see that on the 10th of May, there was a barrage of 300 rockets that were fired from the Gaza to onto Israel. And it is only because of the security preparations of Israel, the Iron Dome, that it was able to save itself. Over the 10-11 days that this conflict went on, there were more than 4,600 rockets that were fired from the Gaza Strip by the Hamas. And some people who speak about the more than 250 casualties, civilian casualties, and of course, I think this is highly regrettable. More than 60 children and 30 women and all, they died. But I think it also needs to be recognized that Hamas would use these, innocent children and women as shield. It would fire from the residential areas, so that the fire back from Israel would also hit these areas, and hence there would be these concomitant casualties which would take place. So, but otherwise, we have seen that in all these, whether it was the 12-story tower that Israel shot down, it devastated and completely destroyed, or some of the other multi-storied buildings, that Israel gave adequate notice to the people in those buildings, in some cases 90 minutes, in some cases 60 minutes, and announced that this is going to come under attack. So all civilians and all those who are otherwise not connected, that they should leave the building, they should leave the area. And because they said it was these buildings contained, whether it was the intelligence units of the Hamas or other senior functionaries were based there, and that is why they were destroyed. So I think Israel has tried to put forward its own arguments as to why, what happened, what was the reason. But otherwise, this also needs to be recognized that Hamas was playing its own political domestic game to get advantage over the Al Fatah group.
Absolutely. General, coming back to you now, let me take a point that Dr. Mishra was making earlier in the program and take that forward with you on the issue of the larger issue of the Arab world seems to be losing interest in the Palestinian cause. It's not the same as it was a few years ago. What is the reason behind that, do you think? We've seen that with passing time, more and more, that the Arab world is losing interest in the Palestinian cause.
See, the standpoint of Arab world is very clear. They don't support Hamas. They do support Palestinian cause to some extent. They are certainly sensitive about Al-Aqsa Mosque and all the religious sites which are there in Jerusalem. But since this movement is being hijacked by Hamas, that is something which they don't like. Now, this is similarly, they also don't appreciate that within Palestine, Fatah is losing ground and Abbas is losing ground. There has been no elections for last so many years. And now when the elections were about to be held, when Abbas found that he is losing ground, then he cancelled that. So considering this, that means the real representation of Palestinian cause is actually not coming up. Is the leadership actual representatives of people? Now there is a question mark there. So that is causing some kind of dilemma as far as the mind of Arabs are concerned. As far as even in the Arab world, if you see, as far as Sunnis are concerned, they are more interested in the mosque part of it and the religious sites, which is important to them. As far as Shias are concerned, as the ambassador brought out, this Hamas was being supported by Iran. It was also being supported to some extent by Qatar. It was also in financial terms, and also Bahrain and some other countries. Now, this is the actions of Hamas are not being appreciated, and this is a typical terrorist tactics to fire from the civilian areas, like the terrorists which are also doing across the border in our context. You would have seen bulk of the terrorist camp or infiltration camps, they are in the civil areas. And the aim is exactly the same, that whenever you want to fire on a terrorist camp and you want to destroy a terrorist camp, there should be maximum civil casualties, and next day they bring the military observers and show that, okay, see, Indian army has caused so many civil casualties. Now the same game they are playing with the Israelis. And the better part is that Israelis have used artificial intelligence, they have used drones, they have used a large number of finest technology in terms of there is a ninja weapon which they have fired, which doesn't have explosive. It's not lethal for civilians, but it is something like a fan structure which went and killed the Hamas leader in his car, which actually moves like a fan and it cuts the body into pieces. So they are trying to come out with certain kind of innovations wherein the civilian casualties are minimized. So they have tried to do their best, and if Iron Dome was not there, certainly Israel also would have had a lot of civilian casualties. And another lesson learned which has come out from this is that there is no air defense system in the world which is 100% proof. There are certain rockets which will certainly find their place even in the best of the air defense systems. So notwithstanding that, the Arabs' pitch has come down because of the reasons which I mentioned. As far as India is concerned, we have stakes. It is a tightrope walk, certainly. And in that tightrope walk, I think whatever our UN ambassador has done, ambassador in the United Nations has done, I think he has done the best. He has used absolute correct language that we support just cause of Palestinians. That was the word which he used. So we are there for the just cause, but when it comes to initiating a war which can lead to casualties of civilians, that I don't think forms within the definition of just. So that is why you will find that as far as Hamas is concerned, not much of support is coming from others as well, including us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Dr. Mishra, since the general was talking about stakes, what's at stake really for the other players as far as the Palestinian cause is concerned? Is it a lost cause really as far as the other players?
Well, the two-state solution has been there for over a decade now, and it is not moving anywhere. And as other two speakers have highlighted, how complex the topography is, how divided the settlements are. and how closely held territories are between these Jewish and the Palestinian settlements. And then also we are talking about the physical division between Gaza Strip and West Bank. So if you are going to have a two-state solution, how are these two units going to come together? It will be like Pakistan having one side on the west and another side in the east, and eventually the eastern side breaking away. So that is something we are witnessing in the context of the physicality, the geography of a two-state solution. So that is not going to happen. Second aspect of that has to do with the ideology. As it has already been highlighted, the West Bank has one specific ideology, that is the moderate Fatah ones, which are prepared to, that particular element is prepared to go for the two-state solution, whereas the Gaza Strip has got a kind of conservative position, and that is that no to the state of Israel, no two-state solution. So it is not going to move forward if these two constituents are going to speak into different voices. Moving forward, how do we move forward? So it is not going to move forward anywhere. What we saw in terms of the military interaction that we had between Hamas and the Israeli state is the interaction that we would have otherwise seen between Israel and Iran, right? So you are watching it in a kind of miniature from a distance. So it is the war that Iran wants to fight with Israel, which was fought between Hamas and Israel, or between Qatar and Israel, perhaps, or between Turkey and Israel. So it is not a simple matter of Palestinians fighting against the Israelis. It's also a matter of other actors from elsewhere in the Middle East coming and trying to take advantage of the confusing situation. Now, Mr. Ambassador talked about the 12-story building. Why is it that Israel attacked it? Because it was housing Al Jazeera office, right? Which is kind of sometimes associated with the Qatari regime, and the Qatari regime is supposed to be providing the financial support to the Hamas and so on and so forth. So it is a very, very murky world of espionage, double dealing, diplomacy, economics, as well as military. So there is no clear solution whatsoever. It has been going on for almost a century now, ever since the idea of a specific Jewish nation was introduced at the turn of the 20th century, and there has been no end to it. And what we see is that the Palestinians in the West Bank are also getting tired of the position that those in the Gaza Strip, especially Hamas, is taking. So it might so happen that they might just move away from the two-state solution argument. And especially when you talk about Jerusalem status being a big question mark now, United States saying that it is prepared to accept Israel to have it as its capital, then what we see here is the complete end to that little of whatever was there in terms of that idea of a two-state solution. So what we need to see, therefore, is a three-state solution, Gaza Strip having a Palestinian conservative state of its own, and those in the West Bank are having a friendly, a liberal interaction with the Israeli states, and Israel itself maintaining its own identity. I don't see a two-state solution. I see a three-state solution, and India has to move forward in that specific direction. It might appear too hypothetical, far-fetched, but all the indications on the ground are in that specific direction.
All right. So talking about going forward, let's get closing comments now. Quick closing comments from all the panelists with the best way forward, starting first with you, Ambassador.
Okay, the professor has spoken about the three-state solution. People are also speaking about the one-state solution. But I think that is, maybe for another program. But very quick, two closing comments and then the best way forward. You see, the response to your question as to why are the Arab states losing interest. Number one, it's been going on for too long. The first war really started in 1949, just after the state of Israel was established. And you had these six big Arab states came and they attacked Israel because it had been given 56% of the Palestinian land, although it was about 50% of the total. It was half of the Palestinian population in that area, but it was still given much more. And with every successive war, whether it was 49, 56, 67, 73, Palestinians have been losing lands. And as the general very correctly said, now they're just enclaves in that area. And when Mike Pompeo came there last year, he even went to West Bank and he tasted some of the wines that were in his given in his name, so that he also put his seal of approval that certain areas of West Bank, they belong, they're a part of Israel. So I think this is one. But the other reason is for the Arabs. Iran has emerged as the main threat, as the bigger threat than Israel. And so they want to concentrate their attention on Iran, and they know that they have similar views as far as Israel is concerned. So you would see that when Pompeo came to Saudi Arabia last year, then there were reports also that Benjamin Netanyahu and the chief of Mossad also traveled to Saudi Arabia to have a meeting with Mike Pompeo. So Saudi Arabia has not is not a part of the Abraham Accords just as yet. But of course, there have been linkages going on. The second point I'd like to make here is, Iran and Hamas say that Israel has no right to exist. They want to obliterate it from the face of the earth. Till these countries maintain that position, I don't think there is going to be any one state, two state, or three state solution. The way forward is, of course, that the international community needs to get together and I think give definite assurance of security and inviolability of borders to Israel also. Once that is given, the portions on West Bank, whether it is Golan Heights and Gaza Strip, all that can come together in whichever format, in whichever manner. And providing full surety for the security of Palestine as well as Israel. And the responsibility really devolves upon the global community. They really need to do this. Otherwise, as far as Palestine is concerned, even in West Bank, that will continue to shrink. These enclaves that General spoke about, they will continue to shrink further, and the problem will get even further complicated.
Absolutely. General?
Just 2 points. One is that as far as bringing peace is concerned, Quad-led, that is US, Russia, UN, and EU, they were supposed to be negotiating that, but that doesn't work very much. Egypt is the one which went off to broker this peace. So when it comes to the solution part of it in future, although people may say that two-state solution is the solution or is a better solution, but the fact is the colonies are so very well entangled, and so are the religious places, that it is practically not possible. The only thing which is practically possible on this earth, although it is nowhere on the card and nowhere on the table, but my practical solution, having gone there on ground, is that they have to learn to coexist. So long Hamas keeps their stand to say that I don't recognize Israel, I don't think anybody will take Hamas seriously from that angle. Nobody can support Hamas, the cause of Hamas, so long they say that I don't recognize Israel. That is what they say.
Absolutely. And Amlendra Mishra, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Thank you. I would sort of highlight a little bit about India's position. India doesn't have to sit on the fence. It doesn't have to stay neutral. There is a saying in international politics that we don't have any permanent friends or permanent enemies. We have permanent interests. So a lot has changed in the West Asian politics. A lot of water has gone under the bridge, so to speak. So we have to sort of use that particular occasion to tailor-make our own geostrategic diplomatic position. So India has made a habit of staying away from these complicated issues by abstaining at the International Council. That's the way to proceed. If it has global ambitions, it has to take a certain stance. It might be unpalatable. It might be unpalatable to the Israeli side, or it might be unpalatable to the Palestinian side. But it has to be decisive. We simply cannot go with the Nehruvian Mamaland politics in the last quarter of the 21st century. So we have to be decisive. New Delhi has to be decisive. It has to seize the opportunity, seize the moment. And as I said, if it is the Arab states have done it, as it has already been pointed out by Mr. Ambassador. I mean, they didn't have any hesitation going and having this meeting. Mohammed bin Sultan, the supreme leader of Saudi Arabia, de facto, of course, is happy to have that negotiation. So the winds of change in the Arab world is in favor of recognizing Israel and putting their weight behind Israel. So I don't see what New Delhi is trying to do here, given that there is no united Palestinian position. So there has to be a kind of strategic rethink. We simply cannot have this kind of fully moral views and say that we want to go on supporting the Palestinian cause and also at the same time alienate Israelis to some extent. We haven't talked about it, right? Israelis were miffed as well. You started with this very phrase that the Palestinians were miffed, but we haven't talked about the Israelis being miffed here. So what we have tried to do by riding two horses is that we have not been able to make either Palestinians happy or the Israelis happy, and in the process, we have made ourselves unhappy. So let's come out of the closet, let's be very brutal and honest about it, and embrace the reality and carry on with the flow, whatever that may be in that particular scenario and context.
All right, gentlemen, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. What's coming out of this discussion is that the issue is an extremely complex one, and how can India take a final decision on it when the Palestinian actors themselves are divided? Palestine is not united, and the leaders of the West Bank and Gaza, that is Hamas and Fatah, don't see eye to eye, so it becomes difficult for others to come to a conclusion. India also does not officially recognize Hamas, so there's not much we can do about it. Considering how the goalposts have shifted and the internal dynamics have changed in the region, it is time that India too takes a relook at our policy. Well, with that, once again, let me thank you for your continued support. For those of you who haven't already subscribed, please subscribe, like the video, hit the bell icon, and then all notifications. Do follow our social media handles for all the latest updates, and you can also subscribe to our newsletter to get some incisive content. The Bharata First team runs a daily Big Picture quiz. Please do participate by going through the description in Big Picture videos. Here are the UPI IDs for those of you who would like to come forward and contribute. A small contribution that you make will be a giant leap for us to keep bringing you this content. Do continue to show your love and support, because I need your support now more so than ever. All this information along with some must-see recommendations are in the description of this video. Please go through it. That's it from me. See you again next time.